And then as it pertains to sexuality, I hear a lot about how different they were sexually than we are today. Like homosexuality was very open and they had these bathhouses, and a lot of these philosophers had like little kid companions that how were they different sexually than we are today?
Yeah, well, obviously, this is one of these contentious areas that people are arguing about, and you'll find scholars who say different things. So, to start with the basics, the Romans don't, in fact, in the ancient world, it's in general, they don't really have our modern system of sexuality in which either you're homosexual or heterosexual. Those are relatively recent terms, actually. And in the ancient world, you were simply sexual. You might have sex with men, women, children, various things. And for the Romans, what mattered less, seemingly, and again, there was some debate about this, but what seemed to matter less wasn't so much who you were having sex with, but the sort of role you played within any specific sexual encounter. So Caesar, for example, and basically this comes down to, are you the active or the passive partner? Is good, passive is bad. So, for example, Julius Caesar was known to have had a relationship when he was sort of a teenager with the king of Bithynia that seemed to have been a sexual one. And this was not necessarily a bad thing because it was homosexual. That's not how they portrayed it. But what Caesar was criticized for was playing the passive role in that sexual encounter or series of encounters. Now, on the other hand, Caesar was known to be very promiscuous with women. So, I mean, I think the Romans kind of viewed sexuality as a spectrum. And, everybody sort of was somewhere on the spectrum between I like having sex with people of the same gender as me and the opposite gender, but it wasn't an absolute thing. You might be here at one point in your life, over here at another time. It might just vary by individual. And some people clearly had strong preferences one way or the other. Some people, 98% of the time might want to have sex with someone of the same gender. So it would approach what we would today label as homosexuality, but that wasn't really how they thought of it. And others would be very strongly the other way. So it was a much more kind of fluid system, and there were different things that they put importance on. And again, this is a topic that there is a ton of debate over, and some people would probably disagree with me here. And honestly, again, the sources are a little bit ambiguous. We don't have a single source that says, hey, here's the Roman system. This is how they thought about this. So we have to kind of pierce together what we think they were doing from lots of stray evidence, many of which are satirical, which is a problem because, is satire a representation of reality, or is it an exaggeration of reality? Or is it reality at all? But anyway, I do think there was a much more fluid notion of things, and they didn't have our strict categories. And one person might appear as what today we would give a lot of different labels to over the course of their lifetime. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff today where people say, oh, Alexander the Great was gay. He had this guy, Hephaestion, who was his lover. He wouldn't have seen himself as gay. Alexander had multiple wives. He had sex with tons of women. He would have seen these are different individual relationships, some with women, some with men, and there's not a problem there. It's not making me anything all the time that I would define myself as. This is the only label that I would have. So it's a very different concept. And also, of course, at least before Christianity, there's not the same degree of shame just in sex innately. I mean, the Romans had all kinds of stuff that we would have regarded as, pornographic today were just part of society, and the Greeks as well. So, I mean, the most common one is you would see erect penises everywhere because they were just a good luck symbol. So you might wear one around your neck, over your doorway. And this wasn't seen almost even to do with sexuality. This is almost just like a good luck thing. But we would find it, many people today would find that sort of shocking to, walk over to your neighbor's house and there's a big penis in the front yard or something. That would not have been a shocking thing for the Romans or the Greeks.
That is so interesting. And again, it makes me think about the sources of where we're getting our history from. You were saying that these elite males who are well educated and very rich were the ones that write the history. And I wonder if we're getting our view of their sexuality from that group. Like maybe in the lower rungs of society, monogamy and marriage is the norm. But as we see in our own society today, elites at the top, celebrities, and people that hang out with Jeffrey Epstein, they have a very different view of what sex is. They're a lot more hedonistic and they're into pleasure and orgies and things. And I think your average everyday person is more about just having a family and getting married. Is that maybe the case in Rome?
Yeah, it was that way in Rome too. I mean, despite again sort of the Hollywood version, the average Roman was not sitting around, at a banquet having orgies. Absolutely not. The average Roman was a traditional kind of family unit. It was a guy and a woman with the kids that they were raising. So that was the norm. Now, was there other elements of sexual behavior? And again, here slavery comes into it because slaves, that's a big thing. Slaves aren't regarded as human beings, they're property. So if a man, let's say, were to have sex with one of his slaves, that wasn't an infidelity, that was just using your property. So again, this is one of these ways where, we're not just like the Romans. We have a very different morality. But generally speaking, I think it would have been more familiar, the sort of sense that, yes, I mean, the Romans aren't these orgiastic, pleasure seeking people. You do get a couple examples of that at extreme moments or by people who are not representative of the norm. But the average Roman, let's remember, is a small time family farmer, probably out in the countryside somewhere with his wife and kids and relatives in a little town. And he probably never travels 25 miles from that town, and he never partakes in any of these things that we tend to study when we study civilization. He just farms. And if we want the absolutely typical experience of someone in the ancient world, it's a family farmer, which is very different from all the soldiers, poets, philosophers, generals, warriors that we tend to study when we study history. They are 15% of the populace. The other 80 to 85% are little family farmers. And that's kind of true for all these civilizations. So if we really wanted to write, I often say it's a textbook that was completely representative of life in the ancient world, it would be 85% about how you farm, and then maybe percent about philosophy, war, history, everything else.